She had come to the mountains to escape the noise of war. But that night, God sent her something far louder than silence. When a storm swallowed the valley, Captain Olivia Parker, a wounded veteran seeking solitude, heard a faint scratching at her cabin door. On the other side wasn't danger. It was a dying husky, blood staining the snow like a warning. She saved him, but what she didn't know was that this dog carried a message from her past and from heaven itself. Within days, Olivia would uncover a 50-year-old secret buried beneath the mountains, a lost love, a hidden inheritance, and the truth about the mother she thought was gone forever. And through the smoke, betrayal, and fire, she'd learn that some miracles don't fall from the sky. They walk on four legs and lead us home. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Or simply comment Amen if you still believe in God's mysterious ways. The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, swallowing every sound that dared to exist in the pine-covered wilderness of western Montana. The cabin, an old cedar-framed refuge her foster mother once called the heart's quiet place, stood alone against the storm. Inside, Captain Olivia Parker sat hunched near the stone hearth, the fire's glow washing over her sharp features. At 33, Olivia was the image of a soldier who had seen too much. Her face still bore the faint scar that cut from her left cheekbone to her jawline, an old souvenir from Afghanistan. She was tall and lean, built like someone who still woke at dawn for drills she no longer had to do. Her dark brown hair, cropped close for practicality, framed pale green eyes that carried both strength and weariness. The army had trained her to survive the impossible, but no one had taught her how to live afterward. She'd come here 3 weeks earlier, after the medical discharge that ended 8 years of service. The explosion, an IED beneath a convoy in Helmand Province, had taken 2 friends and left her half-deaf in her right ear. Since then, silence had become both her prison and her comfort. The cabin, tucked 5 miles from the nearest road, seemed like the only place on earth where the nightmares might not find her. Outside, the wind howled, the kind of primal roar that blurred the line between nature and memory. Olivia tried to focus on the hiss of the fire, on the taste of instant coffee that had long gone cold. But beneath the rhythm of the storm, something else began to surface, a faint, intermittent sound. At first, she thought it was the wind shifting direction. Then it came again, a high, broken whine. Olivia froze, listening. There it was, a desperate scratching against the front door. Instinct replaced fatigue. She reached for the hunting knife lying on the end table, her body snapping into old patterns, slow breath, controlled steps, silent approach. She flicked off the lamp, leaving only the faint amber of the fireplace. The scratching came again, weaker this time. Olivia pressed her shoulder to the wall beside the door, her heartbeat steady, and eased open the latch just an inch. A blast of freezing air struck her face, carrying snow so dense it seemed alive. Through the swirling white, she saw movement, a heap of fur collapsing into the drift at her doorstep. She swung the door open. "Jesus," she whispered. It was a dog, a large husky mix, his coat once silver-white but now matted with mud and blood. He was maybe 5 years old, ribs visible beneath the thick fur, his body trembling uncontrollably. The creature raised his head weakly, and for a heartbeat their eyes met, ice blue, intelligent, pleading. "Easy there, boy," Olivia murmured. Training took over. She sheathed the knife, crouched, and slid her arms beneath the animal's body. He was lighter than she expected, limp with exhaustion. Warm blood soaked through her flannel sleeve. She carried him inside and shut the door against the storm. The heat of the cabin wrapped around them as she laid the dog gently on an old wool blanket near the fire. "Stay with me, soldier," she said softly, the same words she had once used in a dust-choked battlefield. The husky let out a faint whimper. Olivia moved quickly, retrieving the first aid kit she still kept like a ritual. Scissors, antiseptic, gauze, her motions precise and automatic. She cleaned the wounds, noting the deep punctures along the flank, some ragged as though torn by teeth, others thin and straight, like slices from a knife. The combination made her stomach tighten. "What happened to you?" she muttered. He didn't flinch when she touched him. He only watched her with those glacier blue eyes. That trust, or resignation, made something crack inside her. After dressing the worst of the wounds, Olivia sat back on her heels, studying him. "You're a fighter," she said. "You just need a name." She paused, listening to the wind batter the walls, the same rhythm as the dog's labored breathing. "How about Echo? You sound like one." At the sound of the name, the dog's tail thumped weakly against the floor. "Echo it is." For the next hour, Olivia kept busy. She boiled water, soaked beef jerky until it softened, offered it piece by piece. Echo ate with trembling jaws, then lowered his head on his paws and drifted into uneasy sleep. Olivia wrapped herself in a blanket and sat in the armchair beside him. The fire popped and spat, painting orange light across the log walls. Outside, the world was still a white chaos. She should have felt alone, yet for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel hostile. She watched the dog sleep, muscles twitching, legs moving as though running through dreams, the kind of nightmares that mirrored her own. Her gaze drifted to the framed photograph above the mantel. Her foster mother, Margaret Wells, standing beside this very cabin, a younger Olivia clinging to her arm. Margaret had taken Olivia in at 14 after her biological parents died in a highway accident. She'd been a nurse during Vietnam, tough, compassionate, and haunted in her own quiet way. The cabin had been Margaret's sanctuary until cancer claimed her 2 years ago. Olivia had inherited it, but hadn't been ready to face the memories until now. She closed her eyes, letting the fire's warmth blur the edges of the storm. Sleep came in short, fragmented bursts. Each time she drifted off, images flickered behind her eyelids. Flashes of sand and flame, the metallic taste of blood, the roar of an explosion. At one point she woke with a start, heart hammering, the echo of gunfire fading into the hiss of snow outside. Echo was awake too, staring at her from beside the hearth, ears pricked. "It's okay," she whispered, voice rough. "Just bad dreams." He didn't look away. Instead, he inched closer and rested his head on her boot, as if to anchor her. The simple contact grounded her in the present more effectively than any therapy session ever had. Morning came slow and gray, the storm showing no sign of mercy. Olivia stepped outside to gather more wood, squinting against the wind. The cold bit at her face like needles. The world was muted, just white sky, white earth, and the steady groan of pines bending under snow. When she returned, Echo was awake, sitting upright despite his bandages. He looked toward the window, alert, ears forward. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't move, just stared into the forest beyond the glass. Olivia followed his gaze. All she could see was the endless line of trees fading into the gray. No movement, no sound except the wind. Still, a chill ran down her spine. Probably just the wind, she muttered. But she checked the rifle by the door anyway, a habit she hadn't yet broken. Echo lay back down but kept his eyes on the window. By nightfall, the storm had worsened. Olivia fed the fire and glanced at the dog again. His breathing had steadied, but something about the way he occasionally lifted his head, as if listening to something she couldn't hear, unsettled her. She poured herself another mug of coffee and sat near him. "You came out of nowhere," she said. "And somehow I don't think it's by accident." Outside, the snow thickened, muffling the world into silence. Inside, a wounded soldier and a wounded dog shared the same fragile warmth, both unknowingly standing at the threshold of a story that had been waiting 50 years to be found. Echo sighed and shifted closer to the fire. Olivia watched the flames dance in his pale eyes until exhaustion finally pulled her under. The storm howled on, but within the cabin, for the first time in a long while, there was peace. Morning broke reluctantly over the Montana wilderness, gray light filtering through the fog-drenched pines. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world muted by snow and silence. Inside the cabin, Olivia Parker stirred awake to the soft sound of paws shifting on the wooden floor. Echo stood near the window, his bandaged flank rising and falling steadily now. The husky's fur caught the morning light, revealing streaks of silver along his spine that gleamed like frost. His piercing blue eyes too human in their awareness, remained fixed on something beyond the frosted glass. Olivia sat up, the blanket slipping off her shoulders. For a moment, she simply watched him. "You've been staring out there since last night," she murmured. Echo's ears twitched, but he didn't look away. She rose, wincing slightly as her knee protested, a lingering injury from her last mission overseas. Limping toward the window, she peered through the icy glass. All she saw was the frozen forest, a maze of pines heavy with snow, shadows stretching like bars across the clearing. No tracks, no movement, just stillness. "Nothing," she whispered, but the words sounded hollow. Echo's tail lowered, and a faint whine escaped his throat. Olivia sighed and crouched beside him. "You're not just staring, are you? You're remembering." The dog leaned slightly against her, his fur brushing her wrist. She could feel the tension beneath his skin, alert, coiled, waiting. After making coffee and checking the fire, Olivia turned her attention back to her unexpected guest. The gauze around Echo's midsection was soaked through. "Time for a redress," she said, her voice taking on the calm, clipped tone of field medicine. She laid out the supplies again. Antiseptic, clean bandages, a bowl of warm water. As she removed the old wrappings, the extent of the damage came clearer in the daylight. Some wounds were unmistakably bite marks, deep and uneven, wolf or mountain lion perhaps. But others, thin, parallel, surgical, spoke of something deliberate, human. "God, what did they do to you?" she whispered. Echo watched her every move. When she brushed near the deepest cut, a straight line across his shoulder blade, he flinched, not from pain, but from memory. Olivia had seen that reaction before. Soldiers with fresh scars who didn't fear blood but the moment it had come. Her stomach tightened. "Someone hurt you on purpose." She spoke the thought aloud, as if to test it. The dog's gaze lifted to meet hers, those pale eyes searching her face. It wasn't comprehension in the human sense, but something close. When she finished dressing the wounds, Olivia fed him more jerky and water, then sat back on the couch with her coffee. For a long while, the only sounds were the pop of the fire and the faint drip of melting snow from the roof. She caught herself studying him the way she'd once studied her unit, looking for signs, tells, anything that might explain what she was dealing with. Echo's posture was calm but vigilant, his ears flicking toward every faint noise outside. He wasn't just recovering, he was guarding. She smiled faintly. "You and I aren't that different, huh?" As if in answer, Echo turned, padding toward the corner where her rucksack sat. He nosed at it insistently. Olivia frowned. "Hey, that's mine." She got up, but he had already pulled free one of her army patches, the one embroidered with a faded insignia, a pair of wings and a dagger, Ranger Medic. Echo dropped it at her feet and looked up. Olivia stared at the patch. "How the hell did you—" She shook her head. "You just like shiny things, that's all." But the dog's expression remained almost solemn, and for a second she felt foolish talking to him, as if he could understand the ache behind her words. Outside, the light shifted, and a gust of wind rattled the window panes. Echo's head snapped toward the sound. His body stiffened. "Easy," Olivia said, stepping closer. She followed his gaze again and thought, just for an instant, that she saw something dark move between the trees. A shape. Then it was gone. "Probably a deer," she muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. Echo didn't relax. He pressed one paw against the window frame, staring intently into the forest's northern edge. Olivia exhaled slowly. "You're fixated on that direction. Why?" She glanced around the cabin. On the mantel sat an old compass, her foster mother's, brass tarnished with age. Olivia picked it up, flicking it open. The needle trembled, pointing north, the same direction as the forest that held Echo's attention. Something stirred deep in her chest, a flicker of curiosity or maybe intuition. Margaret Wells had always believed the woods held memories. "Every forest keeps its ghosts," she'd once said. "The trick is learning which ones are still alive." Olivia brushed the thought away. "I'm not chasing ghosts," she murmured, mostly to herself. Still, when she looked back, Echo was watching her again, eyes luminous in the half-light. That night, the storm returned, not as furious as before, but steady, relentless. The cabin creaked as wind clawed at its eaves. Olivia built up the fire and tried to lose herself in the radio static, but the only station she could pick up played a gospel hymn warped by distance, the voices fading in and out like whispers from another world. She turned it off. Silence was better. Echo lay near the door, his head on his paws. Every few minutes, his ears pricked at sounds she couldn't hear. Olivia found herself staring at him again, wondering what roads he had run through, what kind of cruelty left marks like his. The coffee in her mug went cold. Her mind drifted back to Afghanistan, the convoy, the dust, the seconds before everything turned white. She could still hear the scream of twisted metal, the ringing in her ears, the moment she realized Sergeant Diaz wasn't breathing beside her. She pressed a hand to her temple, shutting her eyes. When she opened them again, she was staring straight into Echo's gaze. The dog had moved without sound, sitting just a foot away, watching her with unsettling patience. "You can tell, can't you?" she whispered. "You know broken when you see it." The dog tilted his head, and in the quiet of that cabin, Olivia felt something shift, an understanding, wordless but profound. Hours passed. She must have drifted off, because when she opened her eyes again, the room was bathed in cold moonlight. Echo was standing at the window again, rigid, ears forward. "What now?" Olivia mumbled, pushing herself up. Then she heard it. A faint, distant sound that rose and fell with the wind. Not quite a howl, not quite human either. Echo's entire body quivered. The sound came again, echoing through the trees, and goosebumps rippled across her arms. A memory slammed into her. The mountains of Kunar, the night patrol where wolves had howled just before the ambush. The instinct that once kept her alive surged back. She grabbed the flashlight and approached the window. The beam caught nothing but endless white and skeletal pines. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching, waiting. Behind her, Echo whined softly and pawed the door twice, as though pleading. "No," Olivia said firmly. "You're not going out there." He looked back at her, then at the forest again. The intensity in his eyes was impossible to ignore. "What is it?" she whispered. "Someone?" The dog barked once, a short, deliberate sound, and pressed his nose to the crack of the door. Olivia's heart thudded. She glanced toward the rifle resting by the wall, then back at the dog. "If there's something out there, we'll find it tomorrow. Daylight, you hear me?" But even as she said it, she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince, Echo or herself. She threw another log into the fire and sank onto the couch, exhaustion pressing against her ribs. Outside, the wind carried faint noises she couldn't explain. Soft, almost rhythmic, like footsteps buried beneath the snow. Echo remained by the door, unmoving, eyes fixed on the northern forest. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the scars, the discipline, the soldier's logic, Olivia began to feel it too, the pull of something waiting among the pines, calling not just to the dog, but to her. By dawn, the storm had lifted, leaving behind a crystalline silence that seemed almost sacred. Every branch, every pine needle glittered under a crust of ice. The world looked pure, too pure, Olivia thought, as she pulled on her parka and stepped outside to gather firewood. Her boots crunched in the fresh powder, and her breath came out in small clouds that quickly vanished into the cold morning. The air was sharp enough to sting her lungs. For the first time in days, the horizon was clear, the jagged line of the Bitterroot Mountains cutting the sky like a blade. Inside, Echo paced restlessly, tail flicking, eyes fixed on the northern tree line again. He was stronger now, steady on his feet, the stiffness of injury replaced by purpose. The dog whined, pawing at the door. "All right. What's got into you?" Olivia muttered, setting the wood down. When she turned, Echo grabbed the hem of her jacket with his teeth and tugged, firmly, insistently. His blue eyes met hers, the plea that was hard to ignore. "You want to go out?" she asked. He barked once, decisive. Olivia hesitated. The last 2 nights had been filled with strange noises and the feeling of unseen eyes watching from the forest. She'd convinced herself it was just her frayed nerves. But Echo's behavior, so deliberate, so certain, gnawed at her instincts. "Fine," she said at last. "But we're doing this my way." She dressed like she was preparing for a mission. Thermal layers, snow pants, insulated boots, rifle slung over her shoulder, sidearm at her hip. She slipped a small pack onto her back. First aid kit, water, flare gun, compass. Old habits never died. They just waited for a reason to return. Echo bounded ahead the moment she opened the door, plunging into the snow with surprising speed. Olivia followed, the cold biting her cheeks. The forest swallowed them quickly, pines rising like silent sentinels on either side. "Slow down," she called. "You're not exactly fully healed." But Echo only stopped to glance back at her before continuing, nose low to the ground, tail high. He was tracking something invisible to her, a scent buried beneath the frost. They moved deeper into the trees. The snow grew denser, the world quieter. Olivia's senses sharpened. Every sound, a cracking branch, a shifting crow, echoed unnaturally loud. Her military training kicked in almost involuntarily, scanning terrain, noting elevation, estimating direction. An hour passed before she saw something unusual. Marks on a nearby trunk. 3 long scratches, evenly spaced, cutting through the bark. She crouched, brushing off the frost with a gloved hand. The grooves were straight, not random like animal claw marks. Someone had made them intentionally. Trail signs. "Echo," she murmured, touching the marks. "You've been here before, haven't you?" The husky barked softly, tail swaying. He turned north again, pressing forward through the drifts. They climbed a small ridge where the forest thinned, revealing a narrow valley below. In its center sat a small cabin, barely visible under a blanket of snow. The roof sagged under the weight, one shutter hung crooked, and the chimney coughed a faint wisp of smoke. Olivia froze. "What the hell?" Echo barked again, excitement rising in his tone. He bounded down the slope, snow spraying behind him. "Echo, wait!" she hissed, sliding after him. As she neared the cabin, details came into focus. The door chained shut with a heavy, rusted padlock, the windows nailed from the inside. Whoever lived here wanted to keep something, or someone, inside. Echo reached the door first and began scratching furiously, whining, his entire body trembling. Olivia's pulse quickened. "Hey, easy," she said, gripping his collar. "We don't know what's in there." She scanned the perimeter. No footprints, no signs of recent activity except the faint smoke curling upward. Her training screamed at her, "Approach with caution." Still, there was something desperate about the dog's behavior. He wasn't afraid. He was begging her to open it. She knelt beside the door, examined the lock. Old, weathered. It could be broken, but the noise might alert someone if they were nearby. "Echo," she whispered, eyes narrowing. "Back up." He obeyed instantly. She took a multi-tool from her belt pouch, a relic from her service days, and worked the pick with steady hands. Years of field experience hadn't left her. The metal clicked, stubbornly at first, then gave way with a final snap. The chain fell into the snow. Olivia slowly pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, loud in the silence. The smell hit her first. Stale air, smoke, and something else underneath. Illness, decay. Inside, the single room was dimly lit by the dying embers of a fireplace. Furniture sat scattered and broken. On the bed against the far wall lay a man, frail, wrapped in threadbare blankets, his wrist cuffed to the metal bed frame. Olivia's breath caught. "Oh my God!" Echo dashed forward with a sharp bark of recognition, tail wagging wildly. The old man stirred, his head turning toward the sound. His face was gaunt, beard untrimmed, skin pale against the grime of neglect. His hair, white streaked with gray, fell over a forehead lined by years of hardship. When he spoke, his voice came out cracked, barely above a whisper. "Echo," he breathed. Then, with an effort that looked painful, he smiled faintly. "Thank God. You found someone. Olivia rushed to his side, unfastening the cuff with quick precision. Easy, sir. You're all right now. I'm a medic. Former Army. The old man's hand trembled as she freed him. His skin was icy, pulse weak. He tried to sit up but collapsed back with a groan. Who are you? Olivia Parker. I live a few miles west. She checked his pupils, his temperature. You've got hypothermia, dehydration, maybe worse. How long have you been here? He blinked, struggling to focus. Too long. As she wrapped him in a thermal blanket from her pack, Olivia noticed bruises along his forearms. Old, yellowed ones, and fresh ones, dark and recent. Rope burns marked his wrists. These weren't the signs of a man stranded by accident. Someone did this to you, she said quietly. He didn't answer. His lips moved, but the words came out slurred. Nephew. Said he'd come back. Never did. Olivia frowned. Your nephew? Richard, he rasped. Said it was for my own good. Said I'd hurt myself. His eyes fluttered open again, sharp for a brief moment. But he wanted the papers, the claim. Olivia leaned closer. What claim? But the old man's strength failed. He drifted into unconsciousness. Echo whimpered and rested his head on the man's chest. Olivia sat back, mind racing. Whoever Richard was, he'd left this man to die. She scanned the small room. A half-empty water jug, a pot of frozen stew, a shelf with a few cans. Near the fireplace hung a photograph. 2 young people, a man and a woman, smiling before an old cabin that looked eerily familiar. The woman's eyes, kind, confident, made Olivia's chest tighten. She looked like Margaret Wells, her foster mother. Coincidence? Maybe. But in a town this small, coincidences rarely were. She turned back to the old man. Hang in there, sir. We're getting you out. It took effort to lift him. He weighed little more than a child. She carried him to the doorway, Echo circling anxiously. Snowflakes drifted in as the wind rose again, scattering ash from the dying fire. Outside, the forest stood silent, holding its breath. Olivia adjusted the man's weight, secured him in her arms. Echo led the way back through the pines, his tail cutting a narrow path in the white. Behind them, the door swung shut, the lock broken, the cabin's secrets spilling into the cold morning air. The fire crackled softly in the old cabin, sending curls of smoke up through the chimney. Olivia crouched beside Thomas Reed, carefully feeding him spoonfuls of warm broth she had made from the last of her supplies. The old man's breathing had steadied, but his frail body trembled beneath the layers of blankets. His hollow cheeks and sunken eyes made him look older than 76. More like a century of hardship had been carved into his skin. Echo lay nearby, watchful and silent, head resting on his paws. Every so often, his ears would twitch, reacting to something Olivia couldn't hear. Sounds beyond the walls, buried in the endless forest. You're doing fine, she whispered to Thomas. You just need to rest. I'll get you to town tomorrow. The old man's eyes fluttered open. He'll come back, he rasped. He always does. Who? Before Thomas could answer, a noise outside made Olivia stiffen. Snow crunching, steady, deliberate footsteps. Echo's head shot up, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Olivia set the cup down silently, reaching for her rifle leaning against the wall. Her pulse quickened, not with panic, but with that cold focus she'd learned in combat. The footsteps drew closer. Then a sharp knock rattled the door. Uncle! A man's voice, deep and practiced in sounding calm. "Uncle Thomas, it's me, Richard." Thomas's eyes widened with unmistakable fear. "No," he whispered hoarsely. "Don't let him in." Olivia's grip on the rifle tightened. The door opened before she could respond. A man stepped inside without waiting for an answer, brushing snow from his shoulders. Richard Reed looked like someone who belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a mountain cabin. Tall, about 6 feet, broad-shouldered, with an expensive parka and leather gloves too fine for outdoor labor. His face was clean-shaven, angular, and handsome in a cold, distant way. Dark hair slicked back neatly, eyes gray and calculating. He smiled, but it didn't reach those eyes. "Well," he said smoothly, surveying the room. "This is unexpected." His gaze flicked from Thomas on the bed to Olivia standing with the rifle. "Who might you be?" Olivia kept her tone even. "Captain Olivia Parker. I found your uncle here half frozen and chained to that bed. Care to explain that?" Richard blinked in apparent surprise, then gave a soft laugh. "Chained? You misunderstand. My uncle's not well. He's been confused for a long time. He has these spells, thinks people are after him, hides things, wanders off. I had to restrain him for his safety." Olivia didn't lower the rifle. "Is that what you call care? Leaving him in this condition?" Richard's smile thinned. "I left food, water, firewood. The storm came sooner than expected. I was on my way back when it hit." Thomas stirred weakly, his voice barely audible. "Lies. All of it." Richard shot him a quick glance, one that held irritation rather than concern, before turning back to Olivia. "See what I mean? He's confused. You have to understand, he's been living up here for years, alone. The cold, the isolation, it's affected his mind." Echo growled again, teeth bared slightly. "Control your dog," Richard said sharply. "He's dangerous." "He's protecting someone who actually needs it," Olivia replied. "And you still haven't answered why your uncle was locked in." Richard exhaled slowly, the mask of charm cracking just enough to reveal impatience beneath. "Look, Miss Parker, I don't owe you an explanation. This is family business. You've done your good deed, thank you for helping, but you can leave now." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Funny. Your uncle didn't seem confused when he mentioned your name, or when he told me you wanted something from him." That got a reaction. Richard's jaw tightened, the faintest flicker of alarm passing through his composed expression. Then it vanished. "He talks nonsense," he said smoothly. "He's been paranoid ever since my father died. He thinks everyone wants to steal his old mining paperwork." "Mining paperwork?" Olivia echoed. Richard shrugged lightly. "Just some worthless claim forms from the 50s. He clings to them. Treasure. Old men and their delusions." Olivia didn't respond, but something in her gut twisted. She'd seen men like Richard before, confident, educated, entitled, the kind who lied not out of desperation, but out of habit. "I'll stay until I'm sure he's stable," she said firmly. Richard smiled again, this time colder. "You don't seem to understand. You're on private property." Olivia took a step forward, voice calm but edged. "You don't seem to understand either. I'm not leaving a helpless old man to freeze in a locked room." The two stood in tense silence, the fire crackling between them. Then Thomas began coughing violently. Olivia turned to help him, and when she looked back, Richard's eyes were on her rifle. "Don't even think about it," she warned. He held up his hands in mock surrender. "Fine. You're clearly passionate. Let's all calm down. But there was nothing calm in his gaze. When he finally stepped outside, promising to bring supplies from his truck, Olivia followed him to the doorway, watching as he disappeared into the trees. The moment he was gone, she locked the door behind him. She turned back to Thomas. "He's dangerous, isn't he?" The old man nodded faintly, eyes glassy with exhaustion. "He wants the claim, the gold. My partner and I, years ago, we found a seam worth millions, but we couldn't file it together, not under the same name. Too risky back then. So we split it. Half in my name, half in hers." "Her?" Olivia asked gently. Thomas's eyes softened. "Margaret. Margaret Wells." Name hit Olivia like a slap. She froze, staring down at the old man. "What did you just say?" He blinked, confused by her tone. "Margaret Wells. My partner. My love." For a moment, Olivia couldn't speak. Her foster mother's name felt out of place in this story of betrayal and greed. Could it really be the same woman? The gentle nurse who'd taken her in after her parents' accident? The one who used to hum lullabies while patching up her scraped knees? She forced her voice steady. "And this claim? The documents?" Thomas closed his eyes, whispering. "Hidden. Somewhere safe. He'll never find them." As he drifted into uneasy sleep, Olivia's mind spun. She looked around the room again, searching for anything that might confirm his words. That's when she noticed a loose floorboard beneath the bed. She pried it up with her knife. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small leather-bound journal. She opened it carefully. Inside, Thomas's handwriting filled every page, entries dated across months. Notes about Richard's threats, about the gold mine, about Margaret. One passage made her throat tighten. "He says the claim belongs to the family, but Margaret's half is hers forever. I'll die before I let him take it." Olivia exhaled slowly. "So, that's what this is really about." Echo stood beside her, silent, as if he too understood the gravity of what she'd found. The sound of a car engine broke the silence, faint but unmistakable. Richard's truck. Olivia stuffed the journal into her jacket pocket, grabbed her rifle, and moved to the window. Through the drifting snow, she saw the man standing by his vehicle, phone pressed to his ear, eyes fixed on the cabin. Even from this distance, his expression was cold and calculating, like someone already plotting his next move. Echo growled softly. "Yeah," Olivia murmured. "I don't trust him either." She checked the lock again and stoked the fire higher, keeping Thomas warm. Outside, the wind began to rise, and the sun slipped behind the clouds. Something told her that Richard Reed wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The morning came gray and heavy, snow still whispering from the branches like an unending sigh. Inside the cabin, Olivia packed what little she had left. A few medical supplies, canned food, a blanket. Thomas sat in a chair near the fire, his skin pale as parchment, his breath shallow but steadier. "You can't stay here," she said softly, zipping up her pack. "He'll come back." Thomas looked toward the window, where Echo stood, his silver coat glinting in the half-light. "He always comes back," the old man murmured, voice frayed with defeat. Olivia knelt beside him. "Then we'll be gone before he does." Outside, the forest seemed endless, a white labyrinth that both hid and hunted. Olivia secured the pack over her shoulder, helped Thomas stand, and opened the door. The cold hit like a wall. Echo bounded ahead, nose to the wind, ears twitching. They moved slowly through the snow, following a path only the dog seemed to know. The weight of Thomas leaning on her arm made progress difficult, but the old man refused to rest. "Can't stop," he muttered. "He'll follow the tracks." "Then we'll cover them," Olivia replied, pulling the edge of her coat tighter around him. Hours passed. The sun crawled low behind the mountains, throwing blue shadows through the trees. Olivia's breath misted in sharp bursts, her muscles aching. Every instinct told her they were being watched. Then, faint, cutting through the wind, came a voice over her handheld radio. "This is Search and Rescue, Station 2. Receiving faint signal on emergency frequency. Identify." Olivia froze. She hadn't even realized the small radio clipped to her vest had been on standby since she arrived. She pressed the button. "This is Captain Olivia Parker, former U.S. Army. I have an injured elderly male, possible hypothermia, need extraction." Static crackled, then a woman's voice returned, clear and firm. "Copy that, Captain Parker. Name's Sarah Miller, County Rescue. GPS triangulation's weak in this weather, but your signal's bouncing near Red Pine Valley. Can you confirm coordinates?" Olivia looked around the endless snow. "Negative. No visual markers, heavy drift. I can light a flare." "Don't," the woman said sharply. "If you're near Red Pine, that's private mining land. You don't want to draw attention there." Olivia frowned. "And why's that?" A pause. Then the voice came again, quieter. "Because people who light flares in Red Pine tend to disappear." The transmission cut out. Olivia stared at the radio, heart pounding. "Sarah Miller," she repeated under her breath. "Guess we're not the only ones running from something." As if on cue, Echo barked once, alert, sharp. Olivia turned. Through the blur of falling snow, a faint red parka appeared between the trees. "Captain Parker?" A woman emerged, about late 20s. Her movements precise and cautious. She was tall and slender, her auburn hair pulled into a messy braid that escaped from beneath a wool cap. Her face was striking. High cheekbones, freckled skin flushed from the cold, eyes a pale green that missed nothing. Despite the cold, she carried herself with the sure, grounded posture of someone used to the wilderness. "I'm Sarah," she said, lowering her scarf. "You came through on my emergency channel." Olivia's grip tightened on her rifle. "That was fast." Sarah gave a small, wry smile. "I was already out on a call. 2 hikers went missing near Dry Creek. Then your signal hit my scanner. Figured I'd check it before the storm buries everything again." Her gaze shifted to Thomas, who was barely conscious. "He's in bad shape." "Yeah," Olivia said. "He's been held captive. His nephew—" Sarah's expression darkened. "Richard Reed?" The name came out so quickly, it startled Olivia. "You know him?" "I know the name," Sarah replied, pulling off her gloves. "He's been trying to buy up land all through this county. Most of it old mining property. My father used to own part of that ridge." "What happened?" Sarah hesitated, then said quietly, "A fire. 7 years ago. Officially, it was called an accident. But my dad was fighting a legal battle with the same investors Richard represents. After the fire, the case disappeared, and so did the evidence." Olivia studied her face. There was something behind Sarah's steady tone, a controlled fury that came from grief too long buried. "I'm sorry," Olivia said. Sarah shrugged, the motion stiff. I learned that in this town, accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. That's why I switched to search and rescue. Less politics, more survival. Echo moved closer, sniffing at Sarah's boots before circling once and sitting beside her. Sarah smiled faintly. Beautiful dog. Huskies don't usually trust strangers. He's smarter than most people, Olivia replied. Sarah crouched beside Thomas, checking his pulse and temperature with practiced efficiency. We can't take him back to town, not yet. If Richard's got connections with law enforcement, they'll be waiting at the clinic. So what do you suggest? There's an old hunting cabin about 2 miles north, Sarah said. No one uses it in winter. I keep it stocked for emergencies. Olivia hesitated. You sure it's safe? Sarah met her eyes, the corner of her mouth twitching upward. Safe? No. Hidden? Definitely. They moved again, Sarah leading the way through the forest. She moved with quiet confidence, navigating the terrain as if the land itself whispered directions to her. Every so often she'd glance over her shoulder, checking on Olivia and Thomas, her eyes always scanning the horizon. As they neared the ridge, Sarah slowed. Tracks, she said softly, pointing to faint impressions in the snow. Olivia crouched. Snowmobile, she murmured. Recent, within the hour. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then Richard's already out here. They pushed forward faster, Echo trotting silently beside them. The temperature dropped as the trees thickened, the air heavy with anticipation. Finally, the faint outline of a hunter's cabin appeared through the pines. Smaller than the last one, half buried in snow, but intact. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Sarah worked quickly, lighting the stove and checking supplies. There's a medical kit here somewhere, she said, rummaging through drawers. Olivia laid Thomas on a cot, wrapped him tighter in blankets. He mentioned something, she said quietly, about a claim. Gold mine documents tied to a woman named Margaret Wells. Sarah paused mid-motion. Margaret Wells? That name's on half the property deeds in Red Pine Valley. She sold her share decades ago, then vanished. No one knows what happened to her. Olivia's throat tightened. I do. She was my foster mother. Sarah turned sharply. Then this isn't just a rescue mission anymore. Before Olivia could answer, Echo lifted his head and growled, low, warning. Sarah moved to the window, hand on her flare gun. Outside, faint lights flickered through the trees. Headlights, moving slow, searching. Richard, Olivia said under her breath. Sarah nodded grimly. He must have followed the radio signal. Olivia's military instincts surged back to life. She checked her rifle, chambered a round, and motioned for Sarah to douse the lamp. The three of them, the soldier, the rescuer, and the dog, crouched in darkness, the only sound their breathing and the faint crackle of snow outside. Thomas stirred, whispering something Olivia could barely hear. Don't let him take it. Margaret's legacy. Echo pressed close to Olivia's side, body trembling, but eyes locked on the door. Olivia glanced at Sarah. Looks like we're not running anymore. Sarah's jaw set. Then we fight smart. Outside, the headlights stopped. The forest fell utterly silent. The wind outside had gone silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that comes before something breaks. Inside the hunting cabin, the air was thick with the smell of smoke from the wood stove and fear from the people huddled within. Olivia stood by the frosted window, peering into the darkness where the twin beams of headlights had vanished moments ago. She felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air, the instinctual warning that every soldier knows. "He's here," she said softly. Sarah looked up from where she was tending to Thomas. The glow from the small lantern carved sharp lines across her freckled face, her green eyes hardening. "Then we hold our ground," she said, loading a flare into her sidearm. Thomas stirred, coughing weakly. "You can't fight him," he rasped. Olivia turned to him. "I'm not looking for a fight, Thomas, but I won't let him take you again." Echo, ever watchful, moved closer to the door, hackles raised, teeth bared in a low growl that vibrated through the wooden floor. Then footsteps, crunching snow, deliberate, closing in. Olivia motioned for Sarah to kill the lantern. The cabin fell into shadow, lit only by the faint orange glow of the stove. They waited. A voice broke the silence, smooth, confident, familiar. "Captain Parker, I know you're in there." Richard Reed. He stepped into view, framed by the faint light of his truck's headlamps. He was dressed differently now. Gone was the polished parka. Instead, he wore a heavy brown coat lined with fur, gloves tucked into his belt, a revolver holstered at his hip. His hair was damp with snow, his sharp features illuminated by the reflection of the fire behind him. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he called out. "But you've taken something that doesn't belong to you." Olivia's reply was calm, steady. "You mean your uncle's freedom? Or his journal?" Richard's tone hardened. "You've no idea what you're involved in. That claim isn't just paper. It's the key to millions buried under this valley. Do you really think the world runs on justice, Captain? It runs on power." Sarah whispered, "He's trying to draw you out." Olivia exhaled slowly. "Yeah, but we're not moving." Richard's silhouette shifted. He was holding something, a small glass bottle with a rag stuffed in its neck. A Molotov. "Richard, don't!" she shouted. Too late. The bottle shattered against the side of the cabin, flames licking up the wood instantly. Within seconds, heat bloomed against the walls, smoke curling into the rafters. "Get down!" Olivia yelled. She dove for Thomas, dragging him toward the back door as Sarah grabbed the emergency blanket to smother the spreading fire. Echo barked wildly, leaping toward the doorway, his instincts torn between attack and escape. The air filled with choking smoke. Olivia coughed, eyes watering. "Sarah! Window, now!" Sarah smashed the rear window with the butt of her flare gun, sending shards of glass raining into the snow. She climbed halfway through, then turned back to help pull Thomas out. "Come on, old man. We've got you." The old man's frail hands clung to hers, his voice trembling. "Leave me." "No chance," Olivia cut in, heaving him forward. Flames roared behind them as the roof began to crackle. Outside, the snow glowed orange. The entire cabin was now a beacon in the dark forest. Olivia hauled Thomas into the drifts, coughing violently, while Sarah helped Echo out last. The dog shook the soot from his coat, then turned and growled into the smoke. Richard emerged from the other side, eyes wild in the firelight. The flames reflected off his face, distorting his features into something monstrous. "You think this ends here?" he shouted. "That mine was ours. My family built it, bled for it." Olivia raised her rifle but didn't fire. "And your family destroyed itself trying to own what should have been shared." He laughed. A hollow, unhinged sound. You don't understand. That claim was signed by her name, too. Margaret Wells. She betrayed him. Betrayed all of us. The name froze the air between them. Thomas's head lifted weakly. No. You don't know what you're saying. Richard turned toward the sound. Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying. Your precious Margaret sold her half for pennies before vanishing with her lover. Stop, Olivia warned, stepping forward. But Richard continued, his voice venomous. And you, what are you, Captain? The hero trying to fix someone else's sins? Or maybe you're part of the story, too. Maybe you have more in common with my uncle than you realize. The rifle wavered in Olivia's hands. What are you talking about? Thomas coughed violently, clutching his chest. He doesn't know, Richard smiled coldly. You never told her, did you, old man? About Margaret? About the child? Olivia turned to Thomas. What is he talking about? The old man's eyes glistened with tears. Olivia. He reached for her hand, trembling. Margaret wasn't just your foster mother. She was your mother. The world seemed to tilt. The fire, the snow, the shouting all blurred into static. Thomas's voice shook as he went on. She loved me once, before the war took everything. When I went missing in Vietnam, she was told I'd died. She raised you alone until the accident, until they said she was gone. But she never stopped looking for me. That mine, it was supposed to be our redemption, not our curse. Olivia knelt beside him, her throat closing. You're saying... I'm your father, he whispered. By blood, by love, by everything that still matters. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. All the fragments of her past, the nightmares, the unanswered questions about her adoption, Margaret's mysterious silences, snapped together into a picture she wasn't ready to see. Behind her, Sarah kept watch, eyes darting between them and the growing inferno. We need to move, now! Richard shouted something unintelligible and fired his gun into the air. Echo lunged toward him, barking furiously, but Olivia grabbed the dog's collar just in time. Go! She yelled. They fled into the forest, the heat of the fire chasing them through the pines. Snow fell from branches as they ran, sparks scattering behind like dying stars. Olivia half-carried, half-dragged Thomas, while Sarah cleared the path with her flashlight. When they reached the frozen creek, Olivia finally stopped. Behind them, the cabin was a column of fire against the night. Thomas collapsed in the snow, breathing hard. Sarah knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his shoulder. We have to get you to a hospital. He shook his head weakly. No time. You have to finish this. The journal. There's more. Margaret's half. It was hidden before she disappeared. Olivia gripped his hand. Where? His eyes fluttered. Under the stone with the cross, by the old mine entrance. He coughed, the sound rattling deep in his chest. Don't let him find it. Echo pressed against his side, whining softly. I won't, Olivia said. I promise. For a moment, Thomas's face softened. You look just like her, he whispered. Same eyes. Then his body went still. Olivia bowed her head, tears hot against her frozen skin. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll make it mean something, she said quietly. For both of them. Olivia rose slowly, the journal still clutched to her chest. Behind her, the cabin collapsed in a shower of sparks, its light flickering like the final heartbeat of a dying secret. The snow began to fall again, covering the footprints, the ashes, and the past that had finally caught up to them. Snow fell in thick, gentle curtains, muting the chaos that followed the fire. Red and blue lights pulsed through the pines, a quiet salvation breaking the night. Olivia stood knee-deep in the drifts, her breath steaming in the cold, Thomas's body wrapped in a thermal blanket at her feet. Sarah was a few yards away, waving a flare to signal the incoming rescue team. Echo stood beside Olivia, his fur singed at the tips, but his eyes, those steel-blue, intelligent eyes, remained steady and alert. From the ridge came the rumble of engines, then the crunch of boots. 4 rescue workers appeared through the storm, led by a sheriff in a tan coat and snow goggles. "Captain Parker?" he called out, voice cutting through the wind. Olivia turned toward him, exhaustion written across every line of her face. "Here." The sheriff approached. Sheriff Hal Bennett, late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered with a square jaw, half hidden beneath a salt and pepper beard. His eyes were calm but sharp, the eyes of a man who'd seen too many tragedies and still tried to believe in order. "We got the call from Search and Rescue," he said. "Sarah Miller, right?" Sarah nodded, lowering the flare. Her auburn braid was frozen at the ends, and her face was smudged with soot. But she stood straight, unshaken. "He's gone, Sheriff. Thomas Reed didn't make it. And Richard—" She hesitated, glancing toward the tree line where the fire still raged. "He's somewhere down there." As if on cue, 2 deputies dragged a coughing figure from the smoke. Richard Reed, his once immaculate coat now charred and torn, his face streaked with ash. He was alive, but barely. When he saw Olivia, his expression twisted between anger and disbelief. "You think you've won?" he rasped. "You have no idea what you've—" "Save it," Olivia said flatly. "You're done." The sheriff motioned for his men to restrain him. Richard struggled once, but the cuffs clicked shut with finality. "You'll regret this," he hissed, before being hauled toward the waiting snowmobiles. Bennett turned back to Olivia. "We'll get your statement when you're ready. For now, let's get everyone warm." Hours later, the antiseptic brightness of Pinecrest Regional Hospital replaced the dim wilderness. The transition felt surreal. Humming fluorescent lights, beeping monitors, nurses in soft shoes moving like ghosts. Olivia sat in a recliner beside Thomas's bed. The old man lay motionless, oxygen tubes in his nose, his skin pale against the white sheets. The doctors had said he was stable, but unconscious. His body too frail to fight anymore. On the bedside table lay his leather journal, edges worn, pages stained with time. Olivia opened it slowly, her bandaged hands trembling. Inside, in Thomas's careful, faded handwriting, were entries spanning 50 years, stories of his youth, sketches of mountain ridges, maps of mine shafts, and letters. Dozens of them. Each began the same way. "My dearest Margaret." She read one aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "December 12th, 1972. The jungle is endless. I don't know if this will reach you, but I still write. The sound of the rain reminds me of your voice. I keep the photo of you and the little girl folded in my helmet. If I don't make it back, tell her. Tell her her father never stopped looking up at the same stars she sees." Tears blurred her vision. She turned the page and found another, written decades later. "I saw a woman in town today who looked like you. My heart nearly stopped. But it wasn't you, of course. You would have been older. Still, I like to believe you found peace, that our daughter grew up strong, even if she never knew me." Olivia closed the book, her chest tight. She finally understood what Thomas had meant. The legacy that mattered wasn't gold or land, but connection, love, endurance. Sarah appeared at the doorway, still in her rescue uniform, holding 2 cups of coffee. "He's hanging on," she said softly, handing one to Olivia. "Yeah," Olivia murmured. "Always has been." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sarah added, "Sheriff Bennett says Richard's in custody. He's facing charges for arson, assault, and unlawful imprisonment. It's over." Olivia nodded but didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on Thomas, on the frail hand resting over the blanket. "After all this," Sarah continued quietly, "you could go anywhere. Start over." Olivia smiled faintly. "I think I've done enough running. Maybe it's time to start staying." Spring came to Montana like a whisper. Snowmelt carved silver veins down the mountainsides, and the pines shone deep green again. 3 months after that night, Olivia stood on the porch of the old Wells cabin, her mother's home. The repairs were nearly finished. The roof was new, the porch steady beneath her boots. The scent of pine smoke and coffee drifted from the chimney. Echo lay near the fireplace inside, older now but still regal, his coat shimmering like frost under sunlight. He lifted his head when Olivia entered, tail thumping gently against the floorboards. "Hey, partner," she said softly, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. "You kept us all alive. You know that, right?" He blinked slowly, leaning into her touch. Behind her, Sarah stepped through the door carrying a toolbox. She had traded her rescue parka for a flannel shirt and jeans, her auburn hair tied back. "Roof's done," she said, smiling. "You officially have a weatherproof home and the prettiest view in the valley." Olivia laughed quietly. "Thanks to you." Sarah shrugged. "Thanks to us." She glanced toward the mantel, where a framed photo now rested, a faded picture of Margaret Wells and Thomas Reed, young and smiling, standing beside the original cabin decades ago. Next to it sat Thomas's journal, bound now in glass casing. "I've been thinking," Sarah said after a moment, "about what you mentioned at the hospital, starting something here. A rescue outpost, maybe. A place for training volunteers, helping hikers. God knows this wilderness eats people alive if they're careless." Olivia's smile widened. "That's exactly what I had in mind." "Then let's do it," Sarah said. "You and me. The Red Pine Rescue Station." They shook hands. A promise, not a contract. Outside, the snowmelt streamed past the cabin like a living river, and somewhere in the distance, an eagle cried over the valley. Olivia moved to the window. The view stretched endlessly. Pines, ridges, sky. "You know," she said softly, "my mom used to call this place Echo Point. She said every sound you make here bounces back to you someday." Sarah glanced at the dog lying near the hearth. Fitting name. Echo stirred, raising his head at the sound of his name. Olivia smiled, kneeling beside him. "We made it home, boy. All of us." The fire crackled, warm and steady. Outside, the last traces of snow melted into the earth, feeding new growth beneath. In that quiet mountain cabin, beneath the gaze of old photographs and the echo of lives once broken but now mended, Captain Olivia Parker finally found what she had spent years searching for. Not the silence of isolation, but the peace of belonging. Echo let out a soft sigh, curling closer to the hearth. His eyes closed, but his ears twitched to the sound of the wind, steady, familiar. eternal. Somewhere beyond the trees, the world went on. Wars still raged, greed still burned, but in that little valley carved by fate and forgiveness, there was warmth and laughter and the steady heartbeat of second chances. And sometimes, when the wind shifted just right, Olivia could almost swear she heard it. A whisper in the pines, her mother's voice carried on the mountain air. Welcome home. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light, but on quiet nights, through snow, smoke, and the soft heartbeat of loyalty. What happened to Olivia Parker wasn't just the ending of one story. It was proof that faith still breathes in the cracks of our brokenness. A wounded soldier searching for peace, an old man longing for forgiveness, a dog carrying the memory of two lost souls. 3 lives, strangers by circumstance, family by destiny, were brought together not by luck, but by grace. Because somewhere in that frozen wilderness, where hope should have died, God was still writing. He was guiding a soldier home, redeeming an old man's heart, and reminding us that even when we walk through the fire, we are never alone. The Bible says in Romans 8:28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." That's exactly what happened here. What looked like pain became purpose. What looked like loss became legacy. And what looked like coincidence became the hand of something divine, the quiet whisper of a Father who still sees, still cares, and still restores what we thought was lost forever. Maybe that's the real miracle. Not that Echo survived the snow, or that Olivia found her past, but that love found them all, right where they were. Love in the shape of a dog's eyes. Love in the forgiveness between generations. Love in the second chances that none of them thought they deserved. And if you're listening to this, maybe that miracle isn't finished yet. Maybe you've been fighting your own storm, waiting for a sign, a voice, a reason to keep believing. This story is that reminder. God hasn't forgotten you. He still moves through the small things. A kind word, a stranger's help, a loyal companion, to bring healing, even when we least expect it. So tonight, as you close this story, take a moment to thank Him for the blessings seen and unseen, for the strength to keep walking, for the grace that never runs out. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen. Leave a comment with your thoughts, or tell us about a time when you felt God's presence in your own life. And if you believe that love, faith, and loyalty can still heal the world, subscribe and stay with us, because here we celebrate those stories. May God bless you and your family, protect your home, and remind you, just as He reminded Olivia, Thomas, and Echo, that faith always finds its way back home.